Hello everyone, this is RJ Martin with another episode of TINLA, or This Is Not Legal Advice, and nor is it. This one is on the Farrer by-election, which is being held on Saturday the 9th of May 2026, and in particular about Michelle Milthorpe, who has been accused of being a Teal but denies it, and this video will show that that isn't really the case, i.e. that she is indeed a Teal. So to show that she's denying she's a Teal, I've got a couple of videos, one from Sky News with Peter Credlin, and you'll see the next one after, and then, it's well filmed, blah, blah, blah. Put that as a little review.
To another by-election, this time the federal seat of Farrer, New South Wales. Our cameras were there today to see the Liberal and the Teal candidates coming face-to-face in the farming centre of Griffith. Now, Michelle Milthorpe, she's denying she's a Teal.
A lot of people are telling us that that you're a Teal and you're funded by Climate 200, but you are not a Teal. You don't want to be recognised as a Teal. What is all this about?
Oh, look, my positions have been informed by the people that I've spoken to across the electorate. We've seen recently in the last couple of months we really need fuel security as well. So these are things that are probably in contrast to the people that would usually be considered Teal candidates or members. So, it just doesn't work. That label doesn't work for me.
So I'll just pause it there for a second. So basically she's saying, hey, look, I'm not a Teal because Teals, or people who are considered Teals, tend to not believe in fuel, which is a bit silly. Anyway, but we will continue. The next bit shows that she has indeed received loads of money from the Climate 200 group, and we'll get into details about that group soon, as well as go to the AEC Transparency website and have a little chat about Simon Holmes at Court, who, runs the Climate 200 group.
She can say whatever she likes, but if you are funded by Climate 200, you are a Teal. Last year at the 2025 federal election, about 3/4 of Milthorpe's funding came from Climate 200, over 200,000 out of a total of about 280,000. And this time, Climate 200 have said they want to raise $1 million to fight her campaign. Now, her campaign was opened by Teal Senator David Pocock. He's been on the ground campaigning for her, and her campaign manager has worked for the Teals, including Allegra Spender. And there's more sneakiness too, choosing booth worker T-shirts that are almost indistinguishable from those of One Nation. In Griffith today, as usual, pre-poll voters were all but swarmed by the Teal booth workers. Many of them were bussed in from interstate. One proudly told a friend of mine that she'd come up to the area from the Mornington Peninsula, and they're absolutely outnumbering all the booth workers for the other candidates.
So I'll come to the orange shirts as well. It's not a very good place to pause Peter Credlin. It's not a very flattering picture, but unintentional. And here you have Paul Murray, also from Sky, asking Michelle Milthorpe about her affiliation with the Teals.
The reference to Teal's been made a couple of times. Michelle, I've seen in other interviews. It's a label that you don't choose to wear. Instead, there's a fight over orange here about who is more orange, whether it's One Nation or yourself. Let's again deal with head on that question of just how Tealy or not Tealy are you?
Well, as I've said to these guys before, they've clearly not read my positions, or David has, because our water policies are quite similar. But they.
So pausing there for a second, she's accusing the One Nation Party and David Farley of stealing her water policy, which is nonsense, as we'll see. with One Nation having supported the modified Bradfield scheme to bring water from Queensland down through New South Wales and into Victoria for 20 plus, maybe 30 plus years. I remember in the year 2000, I visited someone's house in London, UK, and they had a One Nation flyer, and among that, it had about, water policy, and the government was going to tax people for water storage on their dams, on their own properties, etc. And I'll see what else she says.
They have not read my positions, because if you read my positions, you see that they are informed by the people of Farrer. As I said, no more water buybacks. We have seen city independents vote for water buybacks in the Restoring Our River Act, and my policies simply just don't show alignment in those things. So
where she's saying city independence, she's referring to the Teals, like Rebecca Sharkey, David Pocock, who again denies the Teal label being applied to him, Allegra Spender, Zali Stegel, etc.
I grew up in Cootamundra. My mum thinks it's laughable that I get called that, and
So my mum thinks it's laughable that she gets called a Teal when she is a Teal.
My reality is that my positions are informed by the people of this electorate. I was endorsed by a community group. I wear orange because
the community groups, really, plural, she's referring to are both associated with Simon Holmes at Court, which we'll get into, or his associates.
Cathy McGowan started that as a regional independent over the river. There was certainly not a lot of orange on the polling booths other than Michelle Milthorpe last year. So, my reality is that I want to be a regional representative, and
she claimed, in effect, that One Nation stole the colour orange, which Paul Murray essentially accused her of. And she said, hey, look, Cathy McGowan was wearing orange since 2017, I think it was. I do have a window open already looking that up. But, One Nation's had orange as their colour since its inception in the mid-1990s. And obviously it's based on Pauline Hanson's hair colour. I also do have a couple of windows open with interesting little tidbits on some colour theory as well. So again, here Michelle is falsely claiming that she is not associated with the Teals. It's got in The Guardian, don't call me a Teal, independent Michelle Milthorpe carves a fresh path as she takes on One Nation in the Farrer by-election. If we do a search for the word Teal, we'll see some interesting things. So she insists she's not a bush Teal. That's not a direct quote. She says she finds it laughable and it's a weak and lazy criticism. Okay. And then she's talking about the city Teals again, that, they're different than the bush Teals, if you want to call it that. Now, Michelle, what colour is on your little corflute there? I wonder. So, let's go to some colours. So what is teal? Teal is a mix between green and blue, and obviously Simon Holmes at Court and Associates have picked that colour because in very safe Liberal seats, and the Liberal Party is represented by blue, and the LNP, which is the Liberal National Party where they've combined in Queensland, again is blue, but they're injecting some green into the blue because people in those areas aren't going to vote for Labor. So, they support so-called community independence. or teal independence. And it's like when there were issues in New South Wales with the state election, and you had some interesting monetary policies happening. And what that was based around was in New South Wales elections, there were. I'll try and look up. No, I won't. It'll take too long. But anyway, so in New South Wales, the Parliament banned donors being from certain prohibited groups. So there were those associated with the tobacco industry, those associated with the alcohol industry, those associated with gambling industries, which apparently excluded clubs that have poker machines, and also those associated with property development. In Newcastle City in New South Wales, the Lord Mayor was a known property developer, Jeff McCloy, and he made donations to certain people, including Andrew Cornwall, who's a Cardiff vet who was the member for Charlestown, and a few other people in that area. There were about 10 Liberal candidates that got removed, and that was based on accepting prohibited donations. And some were done with tricky things, such as Andrew Cornwall's wife had a picture that sold from memory for about $30,000 to Jeff McCloy. And, you know, it was all in the news at the time that independent art valuers say that it's not worth $30,000, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, so within Newcastle, you had a by-election, and there was Brad Luke. He was a Liberal Party member, but ran as an independent because, you know, people weren't very happy that the Liberals had made them have an election. Mind you, Jodie Harrison, who's currently in the New South Wales government, last I read, she was Minister for Women and a few other things. But she also was receiving prohibited donations, including after that time period, from a certain wine family, the Drayton family. Mind you, ICAC didn't care about that because they had their own issues to deal with when they were accused of being a star chamber by a prominent lawyer who was accused of telling someone to fake a heart attack during a breathalyzer stop, who was allegedly drunk. And also, there was an interesting thing, since it's got The Guardian, with a Michael McGowan newspaper writer when he worked for the Newcastle Herald. And then he published on what was Twitter, now X, about essentially receiving bribes to make negative stories go away. And the story goes that he contacted the Labor Party or Jodie Harrison, and then offered to sell them the space that would otherwise occupy them accepting prohibited donations, including from the Drayton family. And, you know, if they were just to buy the newspaper space, then the story would disappear. And that's what happened. And then Michael McGowan published that on X, saying something like, oh, here's a great business model. You know, you contact someone about this landmark story, it's going to be so adverse for them, blah, blah, blah. But instead you offer to sell them the space that the story would occupy, and the story goes away. Something like that. Again, you know, ICAC didn't care, which is really terrible. Anyway, you clearly see Teal imagery within Michelle Milthorpe's core flute sign, and you'll see a lot more as well. So again, here's some different shades of teal. You know, you've got lighter teals, darker teals, etc. And with color theory, teal is supposed to be so good because It's about freshness and trustworthiness, and it's modern, and you know, it's so good. It's airy, and it's got luxury to it, and it's a bit retro and minimalist, etc. According to this media.io website. I'll also later contrast the orange of One Nation as well. So again, there's Michelle Milthorpe using a teal colour, and we'll get into her website that magically is colour coded for teal. You know, they call that a dog whistle. Here is Climate 200 and some of their candidates. It is conspicuous that Michelle Milthorpe, even though she's accepted, you know, apparently up to $1.2 million for her elections from the Climate 200 fund, that she's not listed here magically. You've got Kate Cheney, Peter George, even though he's got a red background there. Alex Greenwich, who is a famous Greens candidate, or was, and now he's an independent, a Teal independent, that is. Helen Haynes, David Pocock, Monique Ryan, that's Dr. Dr. Sophie Scamps, Jackie Scrubby, Rebecca Sharkey, ooh, some orange again, Allegra Spender, Zali Steggall, who famously unseated a certain Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister now, but no space for Michelle Milthorpe, magically. Here are some of those people. So again, Kate's got a teal background here, then on her website, teal. Nicolette Bowler, who I think was also in that little swipey screen. I'll just have a quick look again. Oh, she's in a different screen. But, you know, she's got teal as well. Andrew Wilkie also wasn't in the other swipey screen. Let's see if his website shows any teal. Hidden on here somewhere. No, not for him. He's a famous ex-spy, by the way. So Nicolette Bowler, have you pronounce a name? Teal colours. Peter George. Look for some hidden teal. It's sort of like Where's Wally? There's a shade of teal and another one. Peter George. You've got sort of a lighter teal there. And, you know, more teal behind him. There's a more green than teal, like, you know, the base colour of teal, but with added green for Alex Greenwich. Again, same colour, or similar colour. David Pocock. Looks sort of like a teal suit, but it might be blue. He does have an underline of teal there. This is the Climate 200 website, sorry. I'll wait till I go to his actual website. There you go, a teal coloured suit. Even if he denies being a teal. Dr. Monique Ryan, again a different shade of teal, it's a bit more blue. Maybe it means she's a bit more conservative in the colour theory space. Again, more darky green teal there. And different shades. Very blue teal there. Even a Chambers teal. But not much teal on a website. As in the colour. Jackie Scrubby, more blue again. More teal. Rebecca Sharkey's orange there. but her website clearly teal, very similar shade to Michelle Milthorpe's, whose page is slightly darker in terms of the teal colour. Allegra Spender, she's got some teal colours on her website with the font and the backgrounds. Sally Stegel, more blue, but still a shade of teal. Or aqua, you can also say. Again, website with teal on it. And just a quick side note, what does orange mean in colour theory? According to this website, brings together warmth and momentum and action energy. And it's often combined with blue for stability, trust and clarity. Close that temporarily. This should be the AEC website. Anyway, so back to Michelle's website. You clearly see the teal colouring there. You've got her policies here. You've got about water management. You've got about water management, housing, school funding, immigration, fuel security, etc. Go into some of these a bit deeper. So again, you know, I'm not a teal. Just everything about me is teal, and I love the colour teal. So, which one's this one? Website's kind of a bit funny looking there, where it's overlapping. I'll just refresh it. It's got some orange colours as well. No, apparently the website's just got font issues. At least on my computer. So you'll see some of the policies are about water management. Again, you know, she did claim essentially that One Nation stole her water policy, which One Nation's had that water policy for 26 to 30 years. Going through these very quickly. You know, everyone wants affordable housing. Release says they do when they're running for Parliament. Mind you, they also want the housing prices to stay high because that way, you know, people feel rich because, oh, I live in a $500 million house, which, you know, 20 years ago was $10 million, or they live in a $3 million house that 10 years ago or 20 years ago was $190,000 or whatever. She likes immigration and giving special pathways and special affordable housing to so-called newcomers. She wants TAFE to be free or expanding the fee-free option. So some courses where there are known skill shortages, the state government pays for people to be able to do that if they haven't had you know, higher qualifications in the past few years. It's a summary. And they've got this fuel security and fuel prices. I wonder if that is a new thing since the Iran conflict. She does say about the unnecessary war that's hurting our economy. She does support halving of the fuel excise tax, which is her taking a One Nation policy. So when the conflict started, One Nation said about halving it or getting rid of it completely, as well as removing a GST, including on the petrol excise, etc., etc. And then, you know, Labor ended up taking that policy as well, and the Liberals claiming it as well. But I remember One Nation was on TV saying, hey, look, we should do this. And they've probably been saying about that for many years as well. Again, you know, all of her letterheads have teal colour. So, close those ones quickly. with Kathy McGowan and Orange. So it was 2013, apparently, that she brought in Orange in a next door seat of Indi. Or Indy, if you want to call it Indy, but people pronounce it Indi. She's nearly Indigo. Ha ha ha. You got the Liberal parties saying that she's a Teal. There's Simon Holmes at court, and you know she's got a Teal manager. Teal's independent voting record 73% in line with the Greens. That's a bit silly anyway, because I did a tour of Parliament, the New South Wales State Parliament, many years ago, and they used a figure like, I forget what it was exactly, but 85 or 95% or somewhere in between of policies, bills go through and become legislation without any real form of debate. So, you know, the Liberal Party and Labor Party are very similar anyway. But anyway, so we'll have a look at what else they talk about. So with this, is this the energy one? With Michelle Milthorpe, you may ask about Simon Holmes à Court and what his involvement is. And within Michelle Milthorpe's policies, she wants to get rid of fossil fuels. So that's a bit contradictory to her saying about, hey, get rid of the half of the fuel excise on fossil fuels. You have about windmills in here, batteries, renewable energy, and nuclear energy. And as I'll show, Simon Holmes à Court and the Climate 200 mob, their vested interests in terms of so-called renewable energy, battery, and even nuclear power. And I did beat Simon Holmes à Court in an online Twitter debate back when it was Twitter, around 2017, I think it was. And basically he was spouting some nonsense. And then, you know, I got in a public debate with him with, you know, his followers and my followers and whoever else, seeing the back and forth that went for quite a while. It might have even been a few days. And then I asked him if he's got a dog in the fight, if he's a vested interest, and he lied and said he isn't. And then I started posting a bunch of articles where he clearly is and stands to financially benefit. And back then I think there was also about the carbon credits. And, you know, he's also got involvement with carbon credits. Now, why do I show this picture? Does anyone know who that lady is? That's Simon Holmes à Court's mum, Janet. And who's that gentleman? That's his dad, Robert Holmes à Court. So Robert Holmes à Court was most famous for being Australia's first official billionaire back in the 1980s. And who's that in the middle? Michael Jackson. So imagine being poor little Simon Holmes à Court and being like, Daddy, I want Michael Jackson for my birthday. I'm not saying it is for his birthday. But then, you know, Robert Holmes à Court gets on the phone to Michael and Michael's like, yes, boss, what can I do for you? And then Robert Holmes à Court's like, you're going to come here. My kid wants to see you. And, of course, this is just a little play on what may have happened to get Michael Jackson into Simon Holmes à Court's house. And they are looking down towards someone. Janet's looking at her husband with glee, and Michael's looking maybe at a kid, and Robert might be looking at his kid too. You know, see your kid's reaction when they see the world's biggest pop star come to your house and hang out. I assume it's at Simon's house. So again, this is Robert Holmes à Court. So his real name's Michael Robert Hamilton Holmes à Court. He was a South African-born Australian businessman. And we'll go into the Wikipedia and look at how much money he had. You know, you have all these complaints about Gina Reinhard now that she's supporting One Nation. You know, she's a billionaire. But what about Simon Holmes à Court, billionaire, who stands to get, or billionaire's son? You know, that's what he's really most famous for, being the son of Australia's first billionaire. And anyway, so as you see, he was actually a baron. You know, you've got all these left-wing people that don't like titles of nobility, but magically you have the Greens and left-wing and communist movements led by very rich people from the aristocracy. And, you know, it's very odd. So he had about 2 billion Australian dollars just prior to the 1987 stock market crash. And how much was that, or how much would that be in today's dollars? So this is the Reserve Bank of Australia inflation calculator. You can only look until 2025, at least until the mid-year, because, you know, that's when they do inflation rates. It's done to the financial year, which starts on the 1st of July. So he was worth about 6.2 nearly billion dollars. So 6.2 is close enough, billion dollars back in 1987. And what happened when he died? He did lose a bunch of money, but we'll get into that. So a third went to his wife, who is still alive, and you know that's awesome for the Holmes à Court family. And 2/3 went to his 4 children. So Peter, you know, he's famous for being not only Robert Holmes à Court's kid, but also an association with Russell Crowe and the South Sydney Rabbitohs, etc. And Paul and Simon, and you know, then there's a mystery child, which may be a girl, or maybe not. Who knows? Whoever it is isn't important enough to be listed, or is wanting their anonymity. So he also Robert Holmes à Court had this racehorse, Black Knight, and it won the Melbourne Cup in 1984. And you know, it's a beautiful horse, and that's cool. But is it really the lifestyle that most people are used to? And just for disclosure too, my parents owned a horse that ran in the Melbourne Cup in 1983. We acquired the horse afterwards, and he was a gelding, and basically in that race he was overridden, so it put strain on his heart, so he couldn't race again. And then, you know, it was either he goes to Knackery or my parents bought him. His name was Combat, and he maybe came third last in 1983. My parents might well have known the Holmes à Court family, but I don't think so. They used to be friends with various ministers in government, and Jerry Harvey and John Singleton, Singo, etc. Anyway, so there's a little bit about Black Knight, the horse. It's cool. Nearly $500,000 in the 80s. So that's about Simon's mum, Janet, and you know, it's good that she's still alive, because they're like Western Australia people. Maybe my parents didn't know them, but my parents used to be quite successful business people as well. Anyway, when Robert Holmes à Court died, he had about 800 million Australian dollars in 1990, and then his private company had presumably with the $560 million, that's presumably included in that $800 million, but it might not be. And if you have the $800 million in 1990, it would be worth $2 billion now. Oh, I was going to do something with that calculator as well. Oh no, I've got it here. So if you get the that amount of money, divide it among, or by 3. Just pause for a second because I buggered something up. Can I pause it with it not wrecking the video? Let's find out. Anyway, so with the $2 billion, that's worth about 6 divided by 3. So this is how much the mother Janet received. So she got about $666 million in today's money, which leaves, it's letting me click things. It's not really. This much among the 4 children, 1.3 billion, divide by 4, so $333 million each. So that's how much in today's money that Simon Holmes a Court received, apparently. It's on public record. Now, what's he worth now? So we know that a certain supporter of One Nation now, which there's no issues when she was supporting the Liberal Party or the National Party, being Gina Reinhard. She also had a very wealthy father, not as wealthy as Robert Holmes a Court, but she's now Australia's richest woman. So according to Google AI, Simon Holmes a Court, obviously they don't publish their own money, but things are done via estimates. But, you know, it's estimated that he's worth tens of millions of dollars. And it could be under $10 million, according to this, in today's money. In which case, that doesn't seem, if it is accurate, which maybe it's not, but it doesn't seem like very good economic management. You know, you should have turned the $333 million into billions of dollars. I'd imagine. Maybe he has. Who knows? But it's interesting. And when they're raising money, they're crowdfunding for the Teals. Why doesn't he just pay that himself? You know, Gina Reinhard isn't putting GoFundMes together, as far as I know, to support One Nation or the LNP or Liberal parties or national parties before that. She's paying with her own money. How come Simon Holmes a Court is raising money from others for it? It's a bit odd. It's a bit like when Bono from U2, you know, he is worth crap loads of money, putting it nicely, not as much as Robert Holmes a Court, obviously, but, you know, he was involved in Live Aid, etc., and they were getting poor people to donate money to then be distributed, presumably some to administration expenses as well, but to Africa, and instead of just donating their own money. But anyway, we'll find out what happens. So, with Simon Holmes a Court, look at what businesses he has. So he's a prominent clean tech investor, entrepreneur, and climate philanthropist, known for funding Climate 200 political funding stuff. So is he a philanthropist if he stands to gain from it? Does seem a bit peculiar again. So he's got investments in Alva Energy. Alva Energy is the only business that is likely to be able to provide nuclear power to Australia. So it's a US-based company, but it's an interesting concept that is it really donations or is it a quid pro quo? You make your own mind up. So it's got about some of his business ventures and whatever. You got Climate 200, so it supports climate action, i.e. green tech, i.e. return on investment for the entrepreneurial work. And integrity. Okay, well, with integrity, how come Michelle Milthorpe isn't admitting that she's a Teal independent? And David Pocock, I do like David Pocock, by the way, but, that doesn't seem like having much integrity. Why do they not have Michelle Milthorpe on the Climate 200 website in a little slidey bars, or even Andrew Wilkie for that matter, or the Buller lady? And, Clean Tech Investments. He's an active angel investor in decarbonising technology. He's got Decarb Ventures. So we've got some of these tabs open that you'll see in a moment. Observant Pty Limited. So an ag tech startup. And it's about remote water monitoring. Is any of the policy ideas with Michelle Milthorpe involved with water monitoring? Is it like, we're going to save water by using Observant Pty Limited stuff, technology? Hepburn Wind. So he had Australia's first community-owned wind farm, and he was the founding chair. An interesting thing with that is I helped out Australia's first community-owned energy retailer, which again we'll show in a second, which was before the Hepburn Wind Farm. And he's also got the Superpower Institute. I guess he might think of himself as a superhero, or want people to think of him as a superhero instead of a shrewd, I should say, businessman that he may well be. What's my return on investment for Climate 200? I imagine he would think. Mind you, with a lot of these so-called clean energy things, if Simon doesn't drive around in an electric vehicle, then, he'd be a hypocrite. But if he does, and he demands that people subsidise electric vehicles in terms of tax subsidies and all this other stuff, then he wants poor people to help him pay for his electric vehicles. One or more, which is a bit peculiar again. So there's old Simon. He's a handsome chap. He could smile a bit more maybe in a picture, but that's fine. He grew up in Perth. He went to fancy grammar schools in Victoria, and he's got a law degree. His father had a law degree as well, and an arts degree as well for Simon. And he was involved with Netscape back in a day when you had dial-up internet. You could get these Netscape CDs sent out or buy them from the shops, and they cost about $10. And they might give you 200 megabytes of internet back in a day. That was interesting. And they also often had free promos, like if you bought computer magazines, you'll get a free one, and then you'll get a new one every month or whatever, so that you wouldn't have to pay them the increased fee, which I don't remember what that was back then. Anyway, so their family's also involved with a lot of cattle stations, and if I click on his dad again, it'll say about mining as well, and also a woolen mill. I get back to his dad. Oh, interesting. His dad studied forestry. That's pretty cool. And there's his Bachelor of Laws. And this is how he made his money, even though there's controversy over where the funds came, as it says here. and people, investors asking for their money back, and maybe they weren't paid back. So invested $500,000 and then persuaded the government of Western Australia to forgive the $500,000 in loans. Blah, blah, blah. What has it got about mining? So Bell Brothers. They also owned a bunch of media, so a few newspapers and also a radio station. So again, Robert Holmes à Court was a bit of a media baron, like Rupert Murdoch, but unfortunately for their family, the 1987 stock market crash took away a lot of their wealth, but it also took away a lot of non-billionaires' wealth as well. He tried buying an airline, so before Richard Branson was buying airlines, Robert Holmes à Court was trying to, but got turned down. And also they're involved in transport as well. So, having a quick look. Wow, they own part of Rolls-Royce. That would be interesting. Does Rolls-Royce have electric vehicles now? Maybe Simon Holmes à Court has an electric Rolls-Royce. That would be nice. And they acted as a white knight. That's funny. I was having a debate with someone who was white knighting today. Anyway, also involved with concrete companies, and Rupert Murdoch again was a competitor. So if I look up mine, see what comes up. Coal. There you go. They made unsuccessful bids as well for a coal mine and tin. What's that? Griffin Coal, Greenbushes Tin, and Emu Wines. So I think the tin is actually a tin company, not Greenbush Tin and Emu Wines. It's one company. Anyway, Simon's welcome to. That's a bit annoying. Welcome to correct anything that's incorrect, or his family is whatever. Happy to do corrections. This one was about different benefits that Simon Holmes à Court can have in terms of being a vested interest if the Climate 200 people get elected, but it's not showing the thing anymore, which isn't helpful. So these are some of the companies that Simon owns or is involved with as a angel investor or otherwise. So you got large-scale solar systems. See if it's got old Simon's face on a leadership team. Now, a lot of people also don't put their name to everything that they're involved with. Anyway, that must have been in the list that they said that he had involvement with as one of the angel investors or something. Oh, here's that article. It's loaded here. I'll just close that because it's not helpful. That's interesting. Climate 200 independents deceitful by not saying who they truly support is a headline on the Sky News website. So here's a decarb site. Simon Holmes Court also has, with all these calculators, a push for electric vehicles, which of course they don't include the greenhouse gases for making electricity for them to actually work. But anyway, and there's a Superpower Institute as well. I can close those ones. Back on this side. Oops. Make this bigger now. We've got the AEC website with their transparency register. And basically, when you run for Parliament, for federal politics in Australia, you have to do disclosures. And that includes if you nominate as a candidate and then don't ultimately run in the election, you might have an issue with registration, that kind of thing. So this is a significant third-party returns, and you have Regional Voices Fund is, there's mineralogy. So that's Clive Palmer. That's interesting. Can look at that later myself. So I'll go back here for a second. So Regional Voices had about $500,000 in payments. They raised more money than they paid out. But also, since mineralogy is there, so too did mineralogy, which is Clive Palmer's party. Now, it's like the battle of the billionaires. You got Clive Palmer, Gina Reinhard, and Simon Holmes at court. And, you just need like some Lynn Fox company involvement and, Westfield's boss and some other people. This is the candidate and Senate group return. So there's Michelle Milthorpe, and she received nearly $300,000 in donations from nearly 300 people. So, just over $1,000 each. And she spent less money than she received in donations by about $5,000, $4,000, whatever. And here's her individual returns. So she received, and I did find a discrepancy in here as well. For 2024, she received 30 grand from Regional Voices Fund, which is also associated with Simon Holmes at Court. And then all these payments are from Climate 200. So 15,275, 44,000, 40,000, $1, 21,000. This is rounding, obviously. 5,000, 600, 3 grand, and 50 grand. And then this is Climate 200, and for the 2025 election, I should already have it preloaded, but these are the donations they've made. If we go down to try and find Michelle Milthorpe. So here's a very odd discrepancy, unless they've got it listed multiple places. I better quickly check that. Oh, they do. I was going to say, because I did think that it was supposed to be alphabetical order in the previous, like where I've preloaded it, but it did appear that it was missing some things from one registry to the other. And Alex Turnbull, which is Malcolm Turnbull's son, is also, on the big climate change, big green energy industry circuit, if you want to call it that, stands to gain from that. He, from memory, was involved in donations to this Regional Voices Fund, which also donated to Michelle. And look, here's 30 grand. to her. I don't know why this isn't in alphabetical order, which is a bit silly. Right, Milthorpe. There's only one there. It says $30,000. We'll just quickly check. The other thing. 200. Milthorpe, 30 grand. Yeah, so that matches up. Anyway, so you also see some other people involved, such as Duncan Turpie. And does it have... There's some Duncan Turpie stuff, but I'm looking for the Alex Turnbull one. Maybe I've closed that window. Anyway, so with Duncan Turpie as an example, I don't know if he's related to Ian Turpie, but he has donated, millions of dollars for political campaigns. Obviously, if there's more than 10 entries for $100,000, that's at least $1 million. So you got $1,055,000, and also donations to Climate 200, which match those figures, but presumably they're an additional $55,000 because otherwise it wouldn't be to a different organisation, Queensland Greens, and to Climate 200. Some of that money, obviously, though, went to Michelle. Now, with the Greens, they do have officially for Greens Queensland and Greens New South Wales, and it used to be said that it was for the Greens all around Australia, that they don't accept donations from corporations. It's a bit odd how they're saying particularly mining, banking, gambling and tobacco industries, which is odd in another way as well. But if it's saying particularly, that sounds like they do get donations from other people. But saying gambling and tobacco in New South Wales, that's already banned anyway. As I said about Jody Harrison receiving money from the Drayton family, with Drayton family wines and bars and stuff like that. There was also a club in, where was it, Wangi or somewhere like that, that gave a donation to Jody Harrison when as prohibited donations, and again that was after Andrew Cornwall got kicked out of Parliament, and the Lord Mayor of Newcastle at the time, and as I said, I think there were about 10 people that got kicked out. It got end dirty donations. And it shouldn't be able to buy political influence, but obviously the people are donating to buy political influence. It can be that you support someone, so you donate to them because you know that they're already on your team, but that's a bit silly. And here's old Courier Mail thing for a Queensland election in 2017, where the Greens were caught accepting corporate donations, even though they say, we ban corporate donations. So that's Amy McMahon, and she previously slammed the major parties from accepting donations from the big end of town, whilst she accepts donations from the big end of town. Such as mathematician, investor and high-end gambler Duncan Turpie, and you saw that he donated more than just 50 grand to the Greens. I wonder, what year was that? 2017. It's a different year though. But I'm just checking. Technically it's to the Queensland Greens, but if that's the same amount of money. And you also have, someone can say, well, Duncan Turpie isn't a corporation, but what if is? I'll skip over that one because I think that's already been dealt with. So with the water claim by Michelle Milthorpe, and she's basically claiming that One Nation stole my water scheme or idea. So the Bradfield scheme was proposed by Dr. John Bradfield in 1938, as it says there, and basically it was to get water from up here, where this water, when it rains, just goes into the sea. But obviously it does affect sea life because they would have less saline water, so maybe there's specialized fish there, blah blah blah. But it was basically to redivert the water instead of just going off into the ocean, that it would go back here, and then you'd flood this area, and then it would end up going through New South Wales and into the Darling river system eventually, and then out in through Victoria and then through South Australia, etc. And there is a modified Bradfield scheme where, with modern imaging, satellite imaging, etc., and hydrographical studies, where they've worked out, hey, you don't need pipes all the way. You can actually make it a lot cheaper. Because, to say, if you put a pipe up to this spot with a pump, you can then dribble the water down based on the topography, and it'll go to here, and then you need another little pipe and whatever, and it made it a lot more affordable. And it's also like the Kalgoorlie water scheme, which was a tragic story because the gent who come up with that didn't live to see it, and he drowned himself when riding a horse. I did do a video on that probably, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, 15 years ago maybe. I think his name was YJ O'Connor or something. Kalgoorlie water scheme. It was technically the Goldfields water scheme. Where's his name? Here you go. C.Y. O'Connor. So Charles Ilverton O'Connor. And, unfortunately, the government was preventing him from doing that. And in Kalgoorlie, which used to be at least Australia's and the world's largest gold mine, that's inland quite a bit, and they need water to mine gold. So hopefully this has a little map. So just looking for a map. So if we zoom out here, well, it's classed as a city, apparently. I thought it'd be more like a town. So you're in the middle of Whoopal. Hundreds of kilometres away from Perth. And there's not much water there. So hence, put a pipe from whichever way it goes, and Bob's your uncle. Now, to be fair, because David Farley is the candidate who is currently polling the best in the seat of Farah, then, I'll go through a few of his things. So, just briefly though. So, that's a One Nation candidate. It is known that he previously tried to join the Labor Party and be a candidate for them. But, way I see it, not only for him, but for Michelle and for, Bilbo Baggins and whoever else runs for Parliament, including myself, I've ran for Parliament a few times, that, I'm proud of those people to stand up and, risk humiliation and people doing dodgy stuff. I've had my fair share of stuff happen to me, and, that should be applauded as and of itself. If someone then has dopey policies or whatever, or they're just stealing people's policies without acknowledgement or whatever, that's a different story. But you have 12 different candidates running in the seat, and they put Michelle Milthorpe as number 11. So he is known to be a successful business person. He is a grandson of, an Anzac. It doesn't mean he fought at Gallipoli, but the light horse. And then, he went overseas in America, was helping them with their cotton irrigation after he solved a lot of problems in Australia with our cotton irrigation. And, also involved with cattle, again, just like Simon Holmes at court has involvement there somehow. And, he may well win tomorrow. He may come second. Who knows? We'll find out. There's been a lot of comments lately claiming that One Nation doesn't have any policies, which is complete garbage. They've had policies and consistent policies for 30 years. Like I said about the Bradfield scheme as an example, and as I pointed out, in the year 2000, I saw one of their newsletters when I visited some Australian person's house in London, the UK, and they happen to have been a member. So they knew I was interested in politics, and they're like, oh, you want to read this? And, they've got comprehensive policies. I heard Bob Catter, which is disappointing that, he can't work with One Nation. Obviously, One Nation's a lot more credible and bigger and more powerful and more resources than the Qatar Australian Party. But, problem is you have all these parties where they have to be named after their leaders because of ego. But with Pauline Hanson's One Nation, she started the trend basically, but she did it because her party got taken over by the two Davids, and David Oldfield and David, I forget his other name, other bloke's name. Anyway, so then she basically got kicked out of her own party, and then they said we need you back because all of a sudden their results went crappy. They did have, I think, from memory, 11 people elected in the Queensland state election around 1997, something like that, 1998. And then, they got rid of her, and it's bugging me, I can't remember the other David's name. Anyway, so they got like family tax policy. I haven't read that, but presumably it's you can income split with your children, which encourages more Australians to have children. Encouraging native-born Australians to be able to do things into the future instead of the aging population, that kind of thing. Slash government waste, that's pretty obvious. Free speech policy, obviously, you should have free speech available as long as you aren't defaming people or inciting violence on people. And I guess that has a caveat of unless your government's at war with those people. But look, they got a water policy, and it'll be the same water policy essentially, maybe with some updates, as they had 30 years ago. And they encourage jobs for Australians and infrastructure to be built. That also goes into the immigration section. New housing, there's massive housing shortages, which again, you got supply and demand. That if you let 1 million people into Australia extra, then you have to have housing for those million extra people when we've already got homeless people in Australia. Hundreds of thousands of people. It's said that, I'll do a different video one day on homelessness. It's probably repeating some stuff I said like 10 years ago as well, with actual statistics. One Nation's all about reducing cost of living. And again, maybe I should do a video on their different policies. I do have a few preloaded here, just to go through roughly. But they're in favour of citizen-initiated referenda. So that's like, hey, I've got this idea to, build a new dam in this area. So you go around and get a bunch of signatures, and then from getting those signatures, you put it to your politician, and then they put it to Parliament. Hey, we want a referenda to build this new dam, or whatever the case may be. And you have to have limits on that too. You can't just be, 2 signatures or whatever, because otherwise they'd have 20,000 referenda. It'll be like, here's a referenda to get rid of my neighbour who's, or referendum I should say, but to get rid of my neighbour who's annoying me or whatever. They got a climate policy. And, they, without going through these and reading what they say, I can reasonably guess that they're against foreign ownership, particularly of Australian farms, agricultural land, mines, that kind of thing. There's farming policy that also probably links into that. With family law stuff, they're very much against, based on interviews I've seen of Pauline Hanson, against false accusations in a family court. And the family court doesn't have the normal rules of evidence, and you also have certain restrictions on evidence. I think that's section 121 of the Family Court Act as an example, and unless things have changed, Western Australia has its own version of the Family Court. Education, that'll include, about TAFE and whatever. Again, I've preloaded that. I haven't really looked at it though at the moment. Immigration, again, supply and demand. And also they're into having culturally appropriate people visit. They're in favour of medical cannabis. And, tax avoidance, Centrelink stuff. That probably also includes NDIS. We had expose of dodgy NDIS businesses with Drew Pavlou and his buddy. And, I'll just skip over a few of them. One interesting thing with Simon Holmes at court being so against them, they actually like nuclear power. And Simon Holmes at court is, of course, going to benefit if Australia does get nuclear power. So it is very odd that he's so resistant to them when he's, paying other people to support nuclear power and other things. And they want to lower prices for households, etc. That's presumably talking about rates and whatnot. But, they think that net zero is a negative and it's destroying Australia, which arguably is true. And, we do have plenty of coal and plenty of gas. We should really be using our own coal and gas and not just sending it overseas. We just had the Iran conflict, and it's shown our fuel vulnerability. For many years, Pauline Hanson was saying in Parliament that we need to not close our fuel refineries, and we've only got 2 left, and one half burnt down or partly burnt down a few weeks ago. So that again's not helpful. But it's like industries where they push for just-in-time manufacturing. It's all good and dandy and it's cheaper until there's a interruption of the supply chain, and then there's all hell to play. In Australia, we got issues with trying to import fertilizer, and you make fertilizer with gas, so it's a bit silly, putting it nicely. There's Liddell Power Station. That got closed down. Looks like Liddell anyway. So go through these quickly. So they want to end net zero, and they want, Australia to be able to use cheap electricity, cheap fuel. And of course that has run-on effects too, because then it's cheaper to be in business, especially where, Australian manufacturers are trying to compete with China and India and Thailand with imports. So, Australian textile mills disappeared. We used to have Rundles near Maitland, Rutherford kind of area. We even had Simon Holmes a court with his father's woolen mills. They want to ban offshore wind installations, which kill lots of animals and also drive away whales and whatever. So in a way, One Nation's more green than a lot of the green people. Those conveyor belts go all the way to the mines too, which is interesting. I've done a tour of Liddell Power Station. End of Bayswater. So that's basically saying, hey, we should have an energy mix, which of course is true. Some problems with wind turbines is, besides they kill a bunch of animals and they're an eyesore, and they use crud loads of energy to even make the electricity, and they're full of oil anyway, and they catch fire and they don't blow in the wind and all this other stuff. But you also have solar. Solar only works in the daytime. Unless you have microinverters on all the cells, then if you have a few cells shaded, it can stop basically all the electricity production, which is interesting as well. I used to have some involvement with solar energy companies, and close that one. Again, use our gas. Why are we giving away gas for free? 56% of gas doesn't even have the PRT or whatever applied to it. And that's the offshore gas. Anyway, it's getting very late. I need to go to bed. I'm sure everyone else does too, especially after edit this, or at least upload it. It's saying about, energy problems in Australia. It would be great if we didn't have the energy crisis, but obviously because One Nation's the most realistic party in terms of, hey, we should actually use our energy resources in Australia, then that's going to benefit them in forthcoming elections. And, a lot of people say they don't like One Nation, or that they're so-called racist or this or that or that. But essentially the One Nation party is what the Labor and Liberal parties were up until the mid-1990s. Back when you had Hawkey and Keating with their water plan. They got about Hell's Gate Dam near Townsville. They got, this isn't specific to Victoria, but obviously with the Bradfield scheme, you get the water. Here you go. Water reform in the Murray-Darling Basin. So send the water from where it falls and gets tipped out into sea and put it back. They're against water buybacks. And Michelle Milthorpe is against those now. So, they've been against water buybacks for 20 years, 30 years, whatever, whenever the water buyback started. Then how are they copying Michelle Milthorpe, according to her? And also having water for a healthy environment. It's like you got certain floodgates and they get closed. And then instead of having tidal flows up the Murray-Darling River system, you've got just blocked off. And then the water goes terrible. and toxic and kills a bunch of animals, instead of allowing the estuarine water, the brine, if you want to call it, the mix of salt water and fresh water to occur, which is also a good spawning ground for fish, etc. We've got about making houses more affordable and living more affordable. And, against foreign ownership, where, Australians ideally should own Australian services like water, power, telecommunications, roads, ports. So you've got a lot of ports that are leased in 99-year leases by the Chinese. Darwin and Newcastle Harbour comes to mind. There's Ashby. Education, One Nation's very much a Labor, as in not Labor Party, but Labourer party for blue-collar jobs as well as white-collar jobs. But, the Labor Party has had a lot left to be desired in terms of that. They claim they're the Labor Party there for the labourers, and then they do secret deals with the unions, with employers, to screw the worker. And of course, you do need a balance between workers' rights and the business rights, because there are dodgy businesses that rip people off, and there's also dodgy workers that rip people off, as an example. And that includes by, not actually working. Look, they're happy for medicinal cannabis. It's a great pain reliever. It's got certain other features. Back in the day when I was doing a science degree, when I was 17, I was studying dual science and teaching degrees at Newcastle University. But it was known back then that Delta 9 and Delta 8 THC induces apoptosis, or programmed cell death, in cancerous cells. And all cancer is where, instead of when the cells divide and then those daughter cells divide and they divide and divide and divide until you got 256 cells, then at the end of their lifespan, they're all supposed to die and be replaced. But that doesn't occur with cancer. So it just keeps expanding and expanding. And, marijuana or cannabis can actually, through chemicals in there, which is the psychoactive part, induce apoptosis in cancerous cells. Michelle Milthorpe also said somewhere on a website, I think it was, about having a royal commission into maybe water or something like that. I don't remember exactly. But One Nation, they got the Banking Royal Commission as an example. And that's when they only had a few people in Parliament. So they already doing royal commissions. So how is it that Michelle Milthorpe claims that One Nation is stealing their policies, or her policies, I should say? That's an interesting thing for Simon Holmes at court, that, One Nation's not anti-nuclear, they're pro-nuclear. And again, he can benefit from that. Now, compare Simon with his, what was it, $333 million in today's terms that he inherited from his father, to Gina Reinhard. So, probably do this one first. So, when Gina's dad, Lang Hancock, or Langley, he died, he was worth about $75 million in 1992. So 2 years after Robert Holmes à Court died, then Lang Hancock died. And I did have a calculator, the inflation calculator for that. But I can't find where that was. Maybe it closed itself. Oh. And anyway, there's good old Lang. He's said some very controversial things in his life too, but that's beside the point. Because they've got some listed here that where was it? That he was saying that Aboriginal land rights don't matter in terms of you've got to mine the land and get the resources out, and it doesn't matter, according to him, that there's sacred spaces or whatever there, and some stuff about half castes and about making people sterile. But besides that part, the point is that people aren't. What's the saying? It's like you don't pay for the crimes of your father, something like that. The point is he left $74 million, so that was a quarter or whatever of what Simon Holmes at court was left, and she's turned that into 41.6 billion Australian dollars, according to there, and a different thing I read said it was like 44 billion US dollars. So Gina Reinhard is a very successful person. She took a bunch of money, $75 million, and turned it into billions of dollars. And Simon Holmes at court took $333 million and a third, and apparently turned it into $10 million. But it's very odd. Also, another funny thing is that it was actually Gina who got the Filipino lady, Rose Porteous, who was an interesting lady. She used to go on, I think it was Burke's Backyard, I saw her and stuff like that. But she was a maid for Lang Hancock, and then they got together and got married and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Hancock Prospecting, so Gina Reinhard, she gave $1 million. Oh, sorry. Yeah, $1 million. My eyes are going funny now. For the elections, which is interesting. The 2024 to 25 period. And as I said, no one was complaining when she was giving money to the Liberal Party. There's Western Australia and Victorian ones as well. And also to Advance Australia. That can be subject to another video if it's interesting enough. Anyway, also another just quick tidbit of information. I said about me having some involvement with Australia's first community-owned retail energy company, which was Innova Energy. So you can actually see a video of that where I volunteered to help them do some fundraising. Unfortunately, they did go into voluntary administration, I just found out, in 2022. And, they only lasted 7 years from inception. And, here's a video I filmed of them when I was doing a sales pitch. There's Virpi. She's a lovely lady from Finland who I haven't seen for many years. Steve Harris was the boss. See who else is in here. And this was filmed in Newcastle somewhere, from memory. Or possibly Lake Macquarie. Yeah, it looks like we've got some other people at the end. I don't know what ended up happening to all these people. Alec Roberts. Looking for Scott. Anyway, you get the idea. You can also go on my YouTube channel and see old COVID restriction protest. So this was the first large-scale one in Australia. I did plan for this same day in every state and territory, all the territories that actually have people in it, i.e. ACT and the Northern Territory, not in Antarctica, but protests, and I'd already been protesting since the 6th of April, and then my protest got taken over, unfortunately, and it is what it is. So you can see that video, sporting a nice moustache, and my suit that was really cool. And here's a pre-Anzac Day 2020, call to arms for people to protest, and then there was some protests. The first one in Victoria that's publicly known, which was with Topher Field, etc. And as you see, I had the World Freedom Day and where is it? Strike. It should be strike something strike. World Strike and whatever. But with World Freedom Day, my slogan or name, title, whatever you want to call it, was later taken by other people. It's not associated with me. And there was Australia's first public COVID restriction protest on the 6th of April 2020 with my YouTube channel. It has heaps less views than Facebook had, but I noticed on my Facebook page that it's like missing 90% of my videos now for some reason. They've changed the videos to Reels, but it's only showing like 20 different things. And that one was basically done in my backyard and suggesting to people, hey, look, if you want to protest, you can go wholehearted, or you could protest where you're exercising, you write stuff on your shirts and stuff like that, which was later taken up by Victor Tay, who I think's a pastor in New South Wales, where he was going to Parliament and had exercising my rights from my idea. The next day I actually went out in public to show that I'm not a hypocrite, for one, and to encourage people to protest if they so wanted. You do have the implied right of political communication. I can't even change this stuff. Delete's not working. But again, see, World Freedom Day, etc. Facebook ended up removing this, but I can only see.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well.
Police going past and seeing what I was up to, and yeah, it was interesting. And it wasn't just me there. There's some other people, but I'll keep their names out of things for now. I was with these, I was quoting relevant medical sources, etc. as well. And anyway, that's all people can see if they go to look that video up, that it's been removed for violating the YouTube's community guidelines, which is garbage. They said it was for false information, which none of the information was false. And then I did appeal it, and they rejected it. And you can join this channel, and there's about 11,500 subscribers and maybe 4.5 million views. And just as a final thing, because this was pretty funny, here's Patrick Conroy when he got elected first to Parliament, and he lied to everyone. He said, if you voted for Labor, and Labor got in, or technically don't even say if Labor gets in, we'll listen anyway. But from memory, he says, like, if you vote for Labor, everyone in the seat of Charlton, which is Western Lake Macquarie and Western Newcastle, will get free internet, and it'll be fibre to the home, and it'll be free, and it'll be fast.
Tune in to 12:33 ABC Newcastle wherever you are. Find more from your favourite shows. Catch up on stories you've missed with abc.net.au/Newcastle.
Well, that's related to the second part of our program as much as the first, which is infrastructure. So I noted my opponent talked about national broadband. Well, the NBN that we're proposing and implementing right now will be a great boon to small business. It'll go to every small business and house in Charlton, and it'll be free, and it'll be fibre, so it'll be the fastest possible connection. The NBN that we're proposing and implementing right now will be a great boon to small business. It'll go to every small business and house in Charlton, and it'll be free, and it'll be fibre, so it'll be the fastest possible connection. It'll go to every small business and house in Charlton, and it'll be free, and it'll be free, and it'll be free, and it'll be free, and it'll be free.
I think it said Labor liar and never vote Labor again on the end. And anyway, so I'll point out, as it says on the bottom of the screen, that this is authorised by RJ Martin in the Brisbane region. And that'll do. Good night, everyone. Hopefully this will be uploaded soon so some people can actually see it before they vote. But either way is fine. Bye. Oh, I will point out too that, I don't know how people could preference Michelle Milthorpe very highly when she's been clearly deceptive on the face of it in claiming that she's not a Teal independent. I don't like dishonest people generally, but if she's lying about that, what else is she lying about? Bye.